and welcome to the A to Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. I'm Charlie Burris, here as always with my co-host, A to Z Sports writer, Zach Reagan. Wherever you listen throughout the world, we thank you so much for listening to us. Zach and I talk everything Vols every week here on the Big Orange Podcast, and if you want to listen to that regularly, go over to the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed on Apple, Spotify, and rate, review, and most importantly, subscribe, because when you subscribe, you'll get all the episodes when we drop them on Mondays. And then YouTube. Yeah, that's what's been blowing up all season long. YouTube has been incredible. Just type in A to Z Sports on YouTube, search it up, and you'll find us there. And hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell. And honestly, your life will be better for it, frankly. Share the show. Oh, too. I'll say that. Tell everybody. Get them in here. We want as many people watching as possible because this is fun as hell. I know I'm having a good time. It seems like the folks that watch have a decent time too. So let them know about it at Charlie_Burris, at Zach TNT, at A to Z Sports, Facebook.com/A to Z Sports Nashville on the social medias, and A to Z Sports.com for all the stuff that Zach and I write. So folks are pouring in here to hang out with us, Zach. I got to start off with an apology. I just want to say sorry to Josh Heupel, Hendon Hooker, Byron Young, Omari Thomas, Jalen Wright, Cedric Tillman, Jalen Hyatt, everybody on the Tennessee football team, because I disrespected them. In our predictions last week for this game, I predicted that Tennessee would win by 11 points. I thought that Kentucky was good enough to come into Neyland Stadium against this football team and actually do something. I can't believe I was that foolish. I am sorry. Kentucky couldn't handle this. What was I thinking? This is absurd. Kentucky didn't belong on the same football field as Tennessee on Saturday. 44-6, the Tennessee Volunteers laid the wood to Kentucky. How dare I disbelieve? Tennessee is the real deal. Zach, what is up, man?
I mean, I got to share in that apology with you because I only had them winning by 10. So definitely not enough respect to Tennessee's defense. Apparently, we had the amount of points pretty close. We both predicted Tennessee would score over 40. Tennessee's defense showing up like that was not something I necessarily expected. You heard all this hype about Will Levis all week being a top 10 draft pick potentially, and a lot of other talk from Kentucky that we'll get into here in a little bit. But just the way that Kentucky's offense operated last season against Tennessee's defense, and some of the, Tennessee gave up a lot of points to Alabama in that shootout and gave up some easy points to Florida. They came out there and shut Kentucky down and really made a statement that, hey, this is a complete football team. It's not a gimmicky offense. It's not a defense that's not going to get stops. I mean, they went out there and made what's supposed to be future first-round draft pick, made him look silly, and it's pretty fun to watch.
That game is what happens when this team puts it all together. And I don't mean that to say that was their best game. Far from it, actually. We're going to talk about it all, and including the Georgia game, too. It wasn't their best game because the offense kind of sputtered out at times, and Kentucky did an admirable job holding up against them, even though they allowed 44 points still. That wasn't Tennessee's best game. But that was what it looks like when the defense comes along with the offense. And Kentucky never stood a chance. They made those boys look silly. Very, very literally embarrassed them. I mean, you could tell with Stoops, you could tell with Levis, they were horrified. They were petrified that they let that happen, that this is the product that they put out on the field against Tennessee. And here's the thing, there's nothing you can do about it. This Tennessee football team's real. And that was kind of the realization that I came to in this game. Like, everything up to this point has really felt like a dream. You beat Alabama 7-0. Oh my gosh. There's still kind of naysayers out there being like, well, is this a fluke? It's a gimmicky offense. This is real, folks. I don't know what else to tell you if you don't believe it at this point, because people were like, well, Kentucky could still, but Kentucky can't do anything. Kentucky didn't deserve to be out there holding Tennessee's jockstrap. Kentucky, and that's not to say that Kentucky's bad either. Kentucky's a pretty decent football team. They're, Levis is all right when he plays his best, and they got Chris Rodriguez and these dudes. The defense is not bad. Tennessee is just way better. Period. That's just the deal. And I think we along with the national media and everybody else kind of learned that on Saturday. Let's get into all of those details here in just a second, Zach. But before we do that, I got to tell everybody about our amazing sponsor that keeps this show running, the great folks at Superbook Sports. Can you beat Vegas this football season? Superbook Sports gives you the chance every week to go head-to-head with the best odds makers in Vegas. No fancy computer algorithms, no guys across the pond setting lines for American sports. Just the best team of odds makers in the business behind the counter at Superbook in Las Vegas. Plus, Superbook features some of the best odds boosts and promo bets anywhere. So download the Superbook Sports app or visit superbook.com and start your battle against Vegas right now. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. Superbook.com. Go and download that app. And on Superbook, last time I looked, it was earlier today. Tennessee was an 8-point underdog going into Georgia. And let me just say, put some respect on this name. Come on down, Georgia. Come on down. An 8-point favorite, Georgia is. No respect. Can't get no respect around here. Doesn't matter if you beat Alabama, beat Kentucky, number 19 Kentucky by 40. Doesn't matter. Can't get no respect. But let's talk about it, Zach. Your high points of that game in terms of what actually happened. We're kind of given the overview there to start here. But in terms of what really happened, some of your thoughts.
First off, this season has been, obviously, it's been so much fun. And one of the reasons it's been so much fun to me is because it feels like old school SEC. It feels like what we grew up watching, or I mean, you would grow up watching in the 90s and early 2000s when we're just old enough to kind of remember and get into football. This is the way it's supposed to be. These big games, Tennessee playing in these big games. Each game has its own storyline. And look, nobody can make storylines for a game like Tennessee fans. I mean, it's incredible. Even the Akron game, that game sticks out because of the way Akron played kind of dirty, and you had the injury to Cedric Tillman. Even the UT Martin game, you had recruiting stuff there with Ty Simpson's dad being the head coach at UT Martin and him being at the game, the Alabama game the week before. It's really incredible, and this Kentucky game was no exception. Kentucky talked a lot about the style of football they play all week leading up to this game. Mark Stoops didn't really put it out there too much, and I thought he did a pretty good job of respecting Tennessee and not dismissing their offense. But Kentucky's offensive coordinator kind of went on a rant, kind of a rant about pro-style offenses and why Will Levis will be so much more better prepared for the NFL than a quarterback like Hendon Hooker, because he can read coverages and make pass protection adjustments and all these different things that he threw out there. And then you had Will Levis talking about real football isn't throwing 80-yard touchdowns. It's sustaining these long drives. And that was part of the storyline heading into the week. And I wondered, and we talked about this a little bit during one of our live streams, about how much do opposing coaches pay attention to these press conferences. Well, we know now that they pay a lot of attention, because after Tennessee beat Kentucky, all the social media posts from players talking about real football. That's real football. Alex Golish, offensive coordinator, put it in his tweet right after the game. Real football. Even Josh Heupel made a reference to real football during his post-game press conference. So with that said, my favorite moment from this game, without a doubt, was the 15-play drive in the first quarter that Tennessee put together. It's like 13 running plays. They only passed the ball a couple of times. They took one shot down the field, got a pass interference call on Jalen Hyatt there. The rest of the drive was pretty much just them running it down Kentucky's throat, and they ran it into the end zone using Princeton Fant as a fullback lined up in the backfield. I mean, what a perfect way to cap off that drive. It included Tennessee going for it on a fourth down sneak where Hendon Hooker popped off the ground, didn't even look to the sideline, just got everybody lined up and went. It was like a fourth and a long one almost 4th and 2, and they snuck it, got the first down. Mark Stoops is losing it on the sideline. And it really felt like that drive was in response to all the talk from Kentucky this whole week. I mean, they pretty much said, you know what, we can do that too if we want to, and we can do it better than you. And they did. And it was incredible. One of my favorite things from this season, without a doubt, just because it shows how much swagger this coaching staff has, how much confidence they have in themselves and these players. And they just went out there and said, we'll play your game if you want to do that, and we'll show you we can do that too. And it was amazing. I loved it.
I did an interview on a show last week with just kind of a neutral third party, college football show. And I said to him, I was like, don't think that this is last year's team. Don't assume that, please, for your sake. Don't assume that. And that is, I think, across the board what Kentucky football team and Kentucky fans thought was coming in this game. They thought it was going to be a shootout. We could hang with them. We're going to do the whole. No, this is not last year's football team, even remotely. They can set up, they can line up and push you back into trenches, and they can run the ball down your throat, and they can get in short yardage situations, and they're going to get it. And in 100 different ways. It doesn't have to just be, they can come right at you and get it. They've done that and continue to do that, but they can also run cute little trick plays, and they can do all these different things, and they just move the ball on you. This is not last year's team where it's all tempo. It has to be the tempo. The tempo is the thing that moves everything. No, it's not like that anymore. Go back, that drive in the Kentucky game, the second half against LSU, this ain't Josh Heupel's first team. This is a whole different animal. And they didn't believe me. I went and looked at the comments on that video, and there were people. It was with Mark Rogers TV. If anybody watches him, I think he's decently popular in the college football YouTube space. But the comments were like, "Who was this guy talking about? The Tennessee is still not did it." You should have believed me. You should have believed me. And it's one of those things that, like, if you have watched this Tennessee team, and at this point you are not bought into, like, Tennessee can at a minimum put up a serious fight against Georgia, I don't know how to help you, because I look at them and I go, this Tennessee team can absolutely beat Georgia. And I'm hard pressed to think anything other than that. Obviously, that's going to be the main thrust of this show here in just a minute. But yeah, that drive was a perfect example of it. They will just line up and run the ball at you, and they couldn't do that a year ago. And now, you look at the defense. I mean, obviously, I think that's what stuck out the most to everybody there. I don't want to say that anything to do with that Jalen McCullough situation was a quote-unquote blessing, but it got big minutes for Danico Slaughter. And look what he does. He goes out and has amazing play in this game. He gets an awesome interception. He lays a sick hit on, what was the kid's name? One of their best receivers lays that awesome hit, and then Juwan Mitchell gets the interception. That was a giant turning point in that game too, because Kentucky was driving to kind of get the game decently close. I think it would have made it a touchdown game maybe at that point. And it just stopped them in their tracks. And all the other guys that stepped up too in that game, Wesley Walker had an excellent game. Some of these other dudes that have gotten in because of these injuries, because of the situation with Jalen McCullough. And then when Jalen McCullough comes back, it's clear that they've gotten more reps and that they've developed. And I mean, just to say enough about that Jalen McCullough situation, we kind of did a live stream last week about it where we speculated about what might be going on. Clearly, Tennessee believes in his innocence enough where they said, we think he's beaten this charge and he's going to play. And fine by me. The University of Tennessee obviously knows far more about that situation than any of us. So far be it for me to tell them otherwise. So that was really, really impressive in that game.
Yeah,
really.
For sure. For sure. The defense is definitely the biggest storyline for me. Like I said, I love that one drive, and it was just kind of Tennessee showing that they could do that. And they've done that at other times this year too, in kind of smaller doses. But otherwise, the offense did what we expected. I mean, they got guys open. They executed. Jalen Hyatt made big plays like he has been doing. It was pretty much what you come to expect from a Tennessee offense. Like you're talking about with the defense, seeing guys like Wesley Walker, get into the backfield, reading screen passes, understanding where the play's going, being in the right spot, able to stop it for no gain. Trayvon Flowers making some big plays that I felt like were underrated in the running game, stopping guys close to the line of scrimmage, coming up, making the right reads. Like you said, secondary just in general played much better. Danico Slaughter made those big plays like you mentioned. It was just this team played with confidence. They played with some swagger. You saw it after some of those big plays, and it was so much fun to watch. I mean, it was a primetime game with the top college football team, the announcers, whatever you think of Chris Fowler and Kirk Herbstreit, they're the guys calling the national championship game. I mean, that's your big game duo. And Chris Fowler does have a nice big game voice. I'll give him that, despite what he said about Tennessee fans in the past. But when Danico Slaughter laid that hit and on the Kentucky receiver and Jawan Mitchell picked that pass off, how loud Nealon got, Chris Fowler's call. I mean, I had chills going back and rewatching it because those are the moments. Those are the moments that we've been longing for the last 10 years, 15 years. Like these huge moments late in the season, these games. I mean, they mean so much to Tennessee right now. They're in a position where, I mean, you've dreamed of being. It was everything. It was kind of a culmination of coming down off the high, off of the Florida win, LSU win, the Alabama win this whole past month, and now you're kind of settling into this new reality for Tennessee. All of a sudden, you're not a team on the rise. All of a sudden, okay, Tennessee can win a championship here. They can win their first national championship in 24 years. They're in a great position to do it. They control their own destiny. They don't need any help. They just have to go out there and play their game. Like, I felt like the season Saturday night flipped from this is really cool what Tennessee's doing, and then fans kind of went into, oh, we are in the hunt for a national championship. Our focus has changed. Like, that's what it felt like to me.
That's exactly it. I already kind of mentioned it there, but I went from this is completely unreal and dreamlike to Tennessee is a real contender in the college football landscape, and let's do this. Like that's how you separated yourself. It was you going, we're not playing with the boys anymore. We're playing with the men. That's what this team is. And I mean, it's here too for Heupel, man. And that's got to be tough. We were talking about this before we got on here. If you're Mark Stoops in this situation, this has to be the thing that makes him take a serious look around at some open jobs. Because if this doesn't prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that you just can't do it at Kentucky, I mean, I don't know. You got your dude at quarterback, and you got a killer running back, and you got a pretty decent defense. And Tennessee hired a coach, and he smoked you in year 2. After 10 years with this guy, and their year 2 coach smokes you. Like, that's got to make you got to take a look around and go like, all right, it might be my time. You know, that Auburn job's open, that Nebraska job's open. Maybe one of these guys will talk to me. And I don't know. I think he's probably hurt himself a little bit this season. Because
I think he waited a year too long, in my opinion.
Yes, he did. I agree. He should have jumped last year. And this year he kind of has gotten exposed to a decent extent because that offense was better last year. He fired that offensive coordinator, right? Did that OC leave?
No. I think he left on his own accord. I think he
left
went
on his
back
own
to the NFL.
But either way, he hired this dude from the NFL that is running this NFL.
No, that's not even an NFL offense to me. Like, maybe they have these checks and stuff, but the whole offense was hand the ball off, line up under center, hand the ball off, screen passes, these little short, just behind the line of scrimmage passes where you're hoping to get the ball in the hands of a playmaker and get some blocks to spring something downfield. Levis only threw the ball downfield a couple of times. He connected with the tight end on kind of a wheel route looking thing where he kind of threw the ball up. It was in the air for a long time, completed that pass. The other times he threw the ball down the field, I mean, Danico Slaughter, he underthrew the ball. Danico Slaughter was kind of in step with the receiver, slightly underthrown. Slaughter makes the play on the ball. Like, that wasn't impressive at all. We've seen Hendon Hooker make those throws a lot to guys like Jalen Hyatt, and he hits them in stride. He doesn't underthrow them typically. They're touchdowns. And that's the difference in Hendon Hooker and Will Levis to me, is that Hooker has the arm or the accuracy, the touch to get that ball down the field. And Levis has just kind of been a product of this kind of archaic system that really, I mean, I guess it's designed to bore you to death and to pick up to get into like 3rd and 2. You know, Kirk Herbstreit mentioned that something in the broadcast. Like that's their goal, is to be in like 3rd and 2 and be confident they can pick that up and put these long drives together. And that you don't really see that much in the NFL anymore at all, really. I mean, the NFL's become an air it out league too. So I'm not sure where the Kentucky OC gets that he's setting Will Levis up for success in the NFL, because I don't know any draft evaluator that could have watched that game on Saturday night and come out impressed with Will Levis or that offense.
Yeah, college football is just not that game anymore. It's completely changed to this offense-focused product, which I'm happy about because it makes college football far more exciting. But it's just not good. And I do kind of wonder what he's going to do. I did want to talk about this. I think it's a pretty good question from Tanner here in the comments. And thanks to everybody for watching. I see Mark Jones, everybody, our regular listeners. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. It means a lot. But Tanner says, here's my alarmist Tennessee question. We have to do these, you know. What makes this different from Ed Orgeron at LSU, Gene Chizik at Auburn? Both guys popped up in year 2, went away just as quickly. We don't know, because
that's a fair question.
I can't see the future. So
I think there's a difference. I think with Gene Chizik, obviously that was Cam Newton. Nobody else from that, no other offensive player from that team ended up in the NFL. I think only like one defensive player, maybe Nick Fairley, defensive tackle,
I think so,
ended up in the NFL. So that right there was an outlier in college football in general. Cam Newton was just unstoppable. When it comes to Ed Orgeron, I think Ed Orgeron's the type of coach you get this, you know, he does great as the intern, brings a lot of energy, and then it kind of settles in. Doesn't do too well once he settles in and gets in a routine. But in 2019, you've got all this talent. You've got Joe Burrow, and then you bring Joe Brady in, who kind of revamps their offense and brings it into the 21st century, and really he was kind of an innovator. Then as soon as he's only there 1 year and he leaves and goes to the NFL, so then you've lost Burrow, you've lost all this talent, you've lost your offensive mastermind. They move on from Steve Ensminger, who was the actual offensive coordinator there. Brady was the passing game coordinator. So then you bring in a whole new set of faces, and Ed Orgeron's not an offensive guy. So to me, that's the difference. This is Heupel's system. As long as Heupel's at Tennessee, the system's going to remain. Obviously, you like having Alex Golesh there because they're kind of in lockstep with each other. They can finish each other's sentences type deal, but it's still Heupel's system. So Golesh will eventually leave if they continue to have success, and he'll go on to a bigger job. You'll promote somebody, you know, that will just kind of continue. That's why I think it's different, because it starts with the head coach more so than anything else. And I mean, obviously, you have to have great players. I mean, Hendon Hooker's a great player. You got to have that to compete in the SEC, and they'll have to continue to add talent, or the system won't work. You got to have good players.
What gives me a lot of confidence is that this is all from Heupel. It is not kind of how you said with Joe Brady. The bulk of that sort of came from him, and he ended up going elsewhere right after that, and it was sort of a flash in the pan thing. This originates with Heupel. Like, he is the brains of this operation. This isn't Alex Golesh being a genius and then he's going to leave this year. So I have hope in that. But like I said, you can't tell the future, and you just you have to just go from there. And I will say I do want to give a shout out. My homie Brian right here. I do a pred show with Brian. He says, are you worried about Hendon Hooker and his longevity while allowing himself to get blasted on runs? I will say to that point, he's been doing better with that in recent weeks, protecting his body. I got to give Hendon credit. And Levis did not do that. If Levis took the hit that he took from Amari Thomas in that game in the NFL, he will get murdered.
Yeah.
That is dangerous, my guy.
I'll give Levis this. He's tough. Hendon Hooker's obviously
he's tough, yeah.
Too. Hooker's a really tough kid too, and Hooker needs to learn to slide better.
He does.
Even when he's attempting to slide, it looks more like a barrel roll in the middle of the field. But Levis is a tough kid. I think Hooker's not like a run first guy. I mean, he does it when he has to, and it's pretty. I mean, he ran more than we realized, I think, on Saturday night. I think he ended up with 10 carries or 13 carries or more than I expected. But he's not just a take off and run if he doesn't see somebody open down the field. But he's pretty smart about it. He's a big guy too. He's bigger than you realize. He's 6'4", 220 pounds almost. It's not like he's a 6 foot quarterback that's tiny out there either. He can absorb some hits. He's not quite Cam Newton, but he can take a few of those.
Well, and the offensive line has helped a lot in keeping him clean, keeping him upright. They've done an excellent job. I mean, very rarely does he just take like big blindside hits. I can think of probably one this season that he has. So, and all credit to them.
That game, what was it? The LSU game, Alabama
big
game,
LSU. He took a massive hit
to the sternum kind of deal. Had a little tough time there, but stayed in the game and hasn't missed any time.
But yeah, he's a tough dude, and so I trust it. I think the only way you keep him out would be a devastating injury. I mean, at this point, he's carrying this team, and this team has national championship aspirations. You're gonna have to do a lot to take any of these dudes out of the game. But that's kind of the wrap on the Kentucky game. I don't know if you had anything else, but it sort of sets us up now for this Georgia conversation. A lot of people have been talking in the comments I've been watching the rankings for this game. Obviously, Tennessee 8-0, Georgia 8-0. Tennessee fans, including myself, kind of perturbed by the AP poll. Sorry, my screen completely froze there. It's kind of perturbed by the AP poll rankings that came out where Tennessee is tied with Ohio State. I would say to that, just so Zach's kind of time crunch today. Go listen to what myself and Jonathan Crompton said on the post-game show. We talked about this exact thing. We didn't know about the AP poll at that point because it was still the night of the game, but we talked about the college football playoff rankings that are coming out tomorrow and how I think if anyone is honest with themselves, the Tennessee Volunteers have the best resume in America and should be number one. That doesn't mean they're going to be number one, but I think that's an incontrovertible fact at this point. But, of course, the fact is you have the ultimate chance to prove yourself this week, and it's all going to work itself out.
There's one real quick. There's one reason. There's one specific reason why they're tied, and it comes down to one AP voter, a Notre Dame beat writer by the name of Mike Barandino. I'm not sure how you say his last name, but he's consistently voted Tennessee below Alabama since Tennessee beat Alabama. Going into that game, he had Alabama 1, Tennessee 9. I think he had Tennessee 6 and Alabama 3 after that. I think he still has Alabama at 3 now, and he's got Tennessee at number 5. So even if he puts Tennessee at number 3, like he should, I mean, I get that argument. I think Tennessee should be 1 or 2. I think they're better resume than Ohio State. But even if you don't think that they do and you put them at number 3, that would still break the tie, and they would be in number 2 all alone. So you can point to that one guy. You can find him on Twitter. He won't be the first that's thrown some shade at him. Even John Bryce, that used to cover Tennessee athletics for Rivals and 24/7 Sports, is in Notre Dame country these days. I guess he was at a Notre Dame press conference, and Marcus Freeman, the head coach at Notre Dame, even threw some shade at this Mike Barandino guy.
Wow.
I think it was like off camera after the press conference. John Bryce tweeted about it. You can go find that. But he's like, I see you've got some heat. And the guy said, well, maybe you can feel my pain. And Freeman said, oh no, I don't feel your pain. I voted Tennessee number 3. And this was before the Kentucky game. So
wow,
everybody thinks this guy's a clown. Whatever.
That's awesome.
That's the reason.
Shout out to Marcus Freeman.
Yes, that's the reason that Tennessee's not ranked number 2 all by themselves.
And big shout out to Marcus Freeman, because we come through this week, homie. We need you. Beat Clemson, please. Dear God, beat them. America needs it.
And then somebody beat TCU, please.
Oh, TCU too. But I did want to touch, just because it's a good comment. Trammell and Jalen Hyatt's hair kind of say a similar thing here to what we were just talking about with Heupel and everything. He says, Alex Golish, the offensive coordinator, should learn from Brent Venables and chill for a while and say F that to the check with less pressure. And then Jalen Hyatt's hair says, Alex Golish is Heupel's Eric Bieniemy, offensive coordinator for the Chiefs, who's now won a Super Bowl and yada, yada, yada. I would love that. I hope that he does, because I think him and Heupel are an incredible duo. I mean, Clearly, it's the best offense in America. What can you even say?
Well, just the fact that they can call plays that quickly and know what to do in that situation in seconds. I mean, you're talking less than 10 seconds between the end of the play and the next time that it's snapped if they're playing with their tempo. That is mind blowing, and it works because Golish and Heupel are just, like I said, they're so in tune with each other with what each other wants to do, and that's hard to replicate. Luckily, you got Joey Hosley, the quarterbacks coach, that can step into that role if and when Golish leaves. You hope you get a couple more years out of this duo, though. And they bumped Golish's pay up to over $1 million. I think it's 1.2. So they're paying him, and Heupel's going to get another raise. Other guys on the staff will get raises. This Tennessee athletic department's different. They pay people now.
I mean, after this season, if it goes the way it looks like it's going, you might have to raise that pay considerably again. But
should we talk about this before we get into the Georgia game, since we're kind of here with Heupel and
go ahead.
Money, I'm sure people have seen by now. I saw some people in the comments brought it up that Tony Romo during the Steelers-Eagles game yesterday kind of threw Heupel's name out there as a person that NFL teams will be interested in this offseason. And the way he said it, he was kind of coy with the way he said it. And then Jim Nantz, his broadcast partner, threw out there, I can tell by the way you look that you know something, which really sent some Tennessee fans into a panic. Personally, I don't see Heupel going to the NFL. I don't think his system will translate to the NFL because the hash marks aren't nearly as wide. You can't create this spacing the way that you do in the college game. Not to mention, it's going to be really hard to get a 33-year-old, 34-year-old wide receiver and 38-year-old quarterback or whatever you end up with playing in a tempo system like that. It's not something you really see in the NFL. And I wouldn't be surprised if they call him. Just if nothing else, just to get some ideas from him and see how it works, and if there is something they can implement. But I think NFL teams will be gun shy because, I mean, look, Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, Steve Spurrier, Matt Rule. I mean, the list goes on with coaches that have failed. For every Pete Carroll, there's 10 college coaches that just couldn't get it done in the NFL. So I think that's a pattern that you have to respect at this point.
It just doesn't make sense to me on almost any level. Spurrier and Saban both hopped after they were pretty well established. They had both won national championships and been where they were for a while. And also, I mean, to your exact point there, stylistically, I mean, Josh Heupel, the way that this offense works, he's essentially taking his offense to the exact limits of what's allowed in college football. And it just wouldn't, in my personal opinion, that would not cut it in the NFL. I don't think you could not do that in the NFL because this is what I've said all season. To stop this offense, you got to have dudes. You got to have just straight up talent that can keep up with Jalen Hyatt. And there's like 3 of those dudes in the entirety of college football. Well, every single guy in the NFL, it can guard Jalen Hyatt. That's why they're in the NFL. They're the best players that ever played college football, and that's why they make it. So, that just makes no sense to me. I don't think people need to panic about that. It's just an offhand comment that was made.
One other thing with that I think is important to note too is Josh Heupel really, obviously, he seems happy at Tennessee. He seems like he loves Knoxville, but more than that, I think the guy just loves college football. He didn't really have an NFL career. He had a cup of coffee there with the Dolphins and the Packers in the preseason. I think he played in like a preseason game or two with the Dolphins, and that was pretty much it. So he doesn't have these deep NFL roots where he spent a lot of time in the NFL kind of living that life. I mean, you've never really, even when he was an assistant, he never tried to make the move to the NFL to be a position coach or anything like that. So I think he genuinely loves college football. He loves the pageantry, the tradition, the passion of the fans. I mean, you don't get 100,000 fans at an NFL game standing for 4 straight hours. You just don't have that kind of environment that you see at Tennessee and Athens or Baton Rouge or any of these SEC towns. I think that is something else you have to consider, just his personality and what he wants to do.
Absolutely. And then to finish off kind of both of those conversations, just this from Cuban Missile said the rankings this week don't really matter. We'll see for sure who the real number 1 is after Saturday. I agree with that to a point. I think these rankings do matter because they're going to be indicative of how much respect you're going to get from the playoff committee. Because if you lose on Saturday, which you were a 9-point underdog, you are not supposed to win this game, and Georgia's an extremely good football team. The chance of you losing this game is decent. It just is what it is. Tennessee can absolutely win, and we're about to talk about how they will do that. But you know, if you do lose, you want to know whether the College Football Playoff Committee is going to be kind of on your side, so to speak, because are they going to value, you know, a garbage Clemson schedule, but or something like or Oregon, you know, out in the Pac-12, are they going to get the respect? Well, their only loss against Georgia too. What are you going to be up against when it comes down to something like that? Because chances are, if you lose this game, I mean, you're going to be a double-digit favorite over every remaining team on the schedule, and you'll be in that position where you kind of have to just watch what they do. And so I actually do think these rankings matter. Even if it's not a huge thing, you at least want to see how they're feeling, maybe.
And the expectation is that Tennessee will be number one from most people that have put predictions out there.
That's obviously what I've seen.
We don't know for sure if that'll be the case, but I agree, and that's not something that I had really thought about, how much kind of buffer you have there, because Tennessee's in a really good spot where this game is not the end of the season by any means at all. But if they do lose this game, you start kind of watching what's TCU do, what's Clemson do, what's Michigan and Ohio State do. You know, one of them's going to lose, but if the other team has one loss, I mean, how does all that play out? A lot of questions that will have to be answered, but we've had these conversations so many times before at the end of October, beginning of November, and it looks like it's such a cluster up there at the top, and it always manages to sort itself out pretty cleanly. So I think it will. We'll just have to see kind of where Tennessee falls if they win, if they lose this game. If they win, they're pretty much in no matter what, as long as they take care of business. It doesn't really matter what happens in the SEC championship game at that point, because a one-loss SEC championship game loser is going to get into the playoff.
Yeah, I mean, the ideal situation to me personally is actually, I mean, it's not the ideal situation because you want to control your own destiny, but in terms of your chances for winning a national championship, I actually think losing to Georgia and not having to play that extra grinding, potentially getting injuries and all of these things game against Alabama, and having to do that and still getting into the playoff, like if you can skip that extra game against Alabama and still make the playoff, that's kind of the ideal situation. But obviously, you know, you want to beat everybody, control your own destiny, yada yada. We all know, but
could be LSU, by the way.
That's true. Could be.
They control their own destiny technically. If they beat Alabama,
we'll know on Saturday night, and that game's in Death Valley. Could get real.
LSU's got a lot better. Jaden Daniels has looked better lately. That win looks really good for Tennessee right about now. If you want to talk about resume builders and all that goes into that. But that, I mean, this is, like I said at the beginning, this is the SEC at its best. When Tennessee and Georgia are playing in November and the winner's going to win the SEC East. When Alabama is fighting to get into the SEC championship game with LSU. That's what makes it fun, when Ole Miss is still there as a contender that can do some damage to some teams. They still got to play Alabama. They can really screw up Alabama's season even if they beat LSU. So, I mean, this to me is the SEC at its best. Last year was not. Last year it was Alabama and Georgia all the way. It was boring. You knew what was going to happen, and we've seen it a ton of times. This is fun.
I think I saw some stat that number 1 versus number 2 in the regular season in the modern era of the SEC, so like after divisions, has only happened 3 times, this being the third. And the other 2 were Alabama LSU games back during the 9-6 grinded out defense days, which
2011, that was
kill me.
So huge. I mean,
it doesn't get bigger. It does not get bigger.
Yeah,
there's literally no way for it to get bigger.
And I think I saw a Georgia fan suggest this, that it's possibly the biggest game ever in Sanford Stadium. Biggest game ever. That is insane to think about. Like, this is Georgia's biggest game of the year. When was the last time that was true of the Tennessee game? I mean, it's since Fulmer was in town. It has to be.
Well, Georgia has never been elite in my lifetime until the last 5 years.
Yeah, they've always been one of the better teams, but they're like a 10-3, 11-2 at their
Yeah,
best, typically.
exactly. Like it was with Rick, it was like a good year is 11 wins, and they did that a few times with him, but most years was 9 or 10 wins. And like they were never this world beater like they are now. So and I'll send Cuban Missile here. He says, how do we feel about Sanford Stadium as a home field advantage to get into the Georgia game here? Go listen to what Jonathan Crompton said on our post-game show. He literally went exactly into this. It's near the end of the show on the A to Z Sports channel, just a few videos back. He addressed exactly this, and he has played there and beaten Georgia and knows what it takes, was recruited by Georgia. He even talks about that. And his take was very much like it's an underwhelming environment. And I think most people think that. It's one of those where they kind of sell too many tickets to blue hairs. Like the old rich folks get too many seats, and so they don't have the best environment that they could have. But I'll direct you there. Now, let's get to this game. Our 3 keys. That's supposed to be the main thrust of the episode. We're 40 minutes in, but 3 keys for Tennessee to beat Georgia. I have mine. Zach has his, and we're gonna lay them all out. Now, I'll send it to you, Zach. Your first key for Tennessee to beat the Georgia Bulldogs.
I'll start off because I imagine we probably both have this on the list, and pretty typical in any SEC game. You have to protect Hendon Hooker. Obviously, you cannot let Georgia get to him. Now, Georgia's going to be without Nolan Smith. He's doubtful. The expectation is that he won't play. Kirby wouldn't say that for sure today, but he's pretty strongly leaning that way. He leads Georgia in sacks and tackles for loss. That's a big loss for Georgia. They're going to have another 4 or 5 star guy to stick in there, but Nolan Smith is a special talent. He was the number 1 player in the 2019 class, and he's been as advertised. So certainly a big loss for Georgia. But why this is so important is because sacking Hendon Hooker, getting pressure on him, is really the only way to stop this Tennessee offense. It's the only time that this offense stalls. When they get off schedule via penalties, which is self-inflicted, or when Hooker gets sacked and they get behind the chains and all of a sudden they're in 2nd and 18 and they can they don't have to respect the run as much in that situation. It kind of throws Tennessee off. So to me, that's the biggest key of the game is keeping Hendon Hooker clean, letting him operate from the pocket and do what he does. If Georgia gets to him, that's their best chance to win.
To that point, my first key was find a way to play mistake-free ball. And in that, guard your quarterback, don't fumble, don't throw interceptions, and specifically to Cuban Missile's point there, don't get bothered by that home crowd. And it's not going to be easy. I mean, it may be one of the kind of middling environments in the SEC, but it's still going to be extremely loud. Make no mistake there. This is it's the biggest game in the history of Sanford Stadium, as we were talking about. It's going to be loud.
They got a little practice against Kentucky this week. I don't know if you noticed, but Heupel several times had to tell the crowd to quiet down when Tennessee was on offense because they were so loud and they were chanting and stuff. That's good practice for the offense, regardless of whether it's your crowd or not. If you can't hear, you can't hear. So that was, maybe a little beneficial. I don't know if it'll be too big of a help to Tennessee, but perhaps it will be a small help.
Well, and Mark Jones makes a good point. He says the Vols' pace will have Georgia silent. That's an excellent point. They do move so quickly that you can't, they're not going to set the ball down, sit in the huddle, let the crowd go, build up and get really, really loud. They get on the ball, they snap the ball. And that's part of the advantage of tempo is that's just another piece that makes it effective. And through that, with the tempo, play mistake free. And the pre-snap penalties, you have to keep those to a minimum because just mistakes in this game are gonna hurt you so much more than against a Kentucky. It's just gonna be way more devastating because Georgia has the team to come right back and score on you. They have a tight end, which is a major in terms of guarding players. Covering a tight end is a weakness for Tennessee. You saw it against Alabama. I mean, they killed you with Latu. And the kid that Georgia has is way better than that guy. So if you can find a way to do that, you have to. What's your number 2 key?
Yeah, well, that I'll slide right into that because that was one of my keys. Is you got to make Georgia's wide receivers beat you. You have to figure out a way to match up these tight ends and try to eliminate them from the game, and make Stetson Bennett beat you with Georgia's wide receivers. That's something. If you don't do that, Georgia's or tight ends are so good, they're so dominant that they will march down the field on you, especially even as good as Tennessee's defense played against Kentucky. Georgia's a lot more talented. They're faster, they're bigger, they're stronger. It's not going to be the same game that it was against Kentucky when it comes to that. So you've got to have a defensive strategy that neutralizes those guys, even if you're willing, you're going to give up these plays to a wide receiver to some extent. But can Stetson Bennett consistently make those throws to them? Will they consistently make the plays? We know the tight ends will. Make the wide receivers beat you. Zero in on those tight ends.
Yeah, you have to force Stetson Bennett because he's not Bryce Young. Stetson Bennett's fine. He won the national championship as kind of a game manager. But make him beat you through the air. And they did a very effective job against Alabama doing that. And the running backs for Georgia are not nearly as good as Gibbs for Alabama. So that is one of the pieces for Georgia this season that I've heard a lot of people say is kind of underwhelming compared to how it was maybe a year ago. Is those running backs. They're just not. They are the 4 and 5 star dudes, but they're just not there yet. And so contain the run like you can, and then through that, find a way somehow to stop the guys that Georgia has with this 3 tight end, whatever they're doing. I mean, you know what they're going to do. Georgia's not hiding their hand at all. They have a major identity on offense, just like Tennessee. And it's kind of the exact opposite. I even looked today. Tennessee is like number 120 something in time of possession, and Georgia's like 7th in America. So you know how they're going to play this game. And if you can score against Georgia and then make stops when you need to, you can open this one up. I mean, they kind of did in the first half last year. I think at one point, didn't Tennessee have like a 14-7 lead at one point in that first half, I want to say? I think at the end of the first half, Tennessee had a touchdown, or into the first quarter, I mean. In the first quarter, I think Tennessee had a 7-point lead.
Well, they were the only team that really did anything against Georgia's defense last year, which was one of the best defenses we've ever seen in college football. So we know that, and obviously Tennessee's offense has got a lot better. So they can have success against this Georgia defense for sure, but also Georgia, they're really good, and Kirby's a better defensive mind than anything I think Tennessee's faced this year, even over there at Alabama, where Pete Golding has such a hand in the way they're playing defense, and that team's just not disciplined like a typical Nick Saban team. So it's going to be a challenge for sure. And that was that. Did you hit your number 2?
Oh, so my number 2 actually conveniently goes to that point. We're sort of we didn't actually coordinate before the show. But,
no, we never do with this stuff.
Yeah, we don't. We like the live reaction. But mine is actually get Stetson Bennett on the ground.
Okay.
Because it goes to that point. If you're going to force him to throw, better yet, sack the guy or hurry him.
Just do that.
Yeah, make him uncomfortable. And, rather than letting him get a pass off to Brock Bowers, just make sure he can't throw at all. That's a plus. But if you can 3 sacks in this game, something like that where you really affect multiple drives, because just like with Tennessee's offense, a sack is going to set Georgia back. It just can ruin drives when you have to go, instead of 1st and 10, you have to go to 2nd and 16. I mean, it just can really set you back. And so do that and get timely stops and then turn around and score on them.
That's part of why Missouri almost beat Georgia this year, is because they had 2 sacks. They had 9 tackles for loss. They were able to kind of penetrate that Georgia offensive line and create some havoc there in the backfield for Georgia, which is not something we've seen. Georgia's offensive line has been so big, so strong. They've been so hard to get past them, to get to the quarterback. Missouri had some success, not a defensive juggernaut by any means. They're better than they were last year, but they're still not great defensively. But they had some success against Georgia. Tennessee, in theory, should be better. But then again, that was the game in Columbia. That was a weird vibe. I don't think Georgia really even realized they were playing Missouri that weekend. I think they just kind of showed up and went through the motions. It was a a strange game. It won't be the same Georgia team that Tennessee faces this weekend, but there's at least signs there that you can get through this offensive line and make some plays.
Yeah, there definitely is, and hopefully they can. It's kind of a I have to see it to believe it. Georgia's offensive line is good. They're tied for first in sacks allowed. I looked at it earlier. Yeah, they're tied with Ole Miss actually in sacks allowed for in the SEC, first in the SEC. Only given seven up all season. And maybe we can add a few to that
Tennessee,
number.
Tennessee got a lot of good pressure on Will Levis Saturday night. Byron Young, Tyler Barron, a lot of those guys were getting to him, came up with a back-to-back sacks in one kind of critical end of the field when Kentucky was still had a chance to kind of get back into the game. They shut it down right there. So Tennessee's defense seems to be peaking at the right time.
Yes.
They still got to get a lot better. There were still mistakes made and things they got to get better at, but they are improving and getting better.
So my third point is this: even if you can't sack the kid, my number 3 point is just do enough. That's it. And I know that sounds like I'm like giving them a low bar. Just do enough to win. It's what they did against Alabama. Yeah, you gave up 49 points. You know how much the offense scored? 52. And so it was enough. It was enough. Just do enough. And I think that has to be the strategy overall with this defense. And I think the one place that you could really hit them, and you saw this in the Florida game, is mistakes. Stetson Bennett threw, I think, 2 interceptions in that game.
Yeah, that third quarter was not good for
really
Georgia
bad
at all.
I think the score of that third quarter was like 17-0 in Florida's favor. So you can get them in mistakes and turn right around and score. And through that, just do enough. That when Alabama muffs a punt, make sure you capitalize. If Stetson Bennett throws an interception, make sure you capitalize, because that's what it's going to take. Do enough on defense, because we know you can do enough on offense. I don't think anybody's disputing that. This Georgia defense is not as good as it was last year. Nolan Smith is going to be out. To the point on the offensive line, Marius Mims might be out. He's one of their best offensive linemen, may be out. It sounds like he's probably going to play, but
questionable. Guy that Jeremy Pruitt tried to sign.
I remember that.
Really tried hard to sign him. We'll just leave it there.
But he went to Georgia. Probably a fine decision on his part, given what Pruitt did. But
yeah,
but just do enough to win the game. That's all I'm asking of this defense. I don't need you to be Superman. I don't care if Georgia's has 600 yards of offense and 60 points, as long as Tennessee scores 61 on the offensive side of the ball. That's all that matters.
Before I get to my third one, this comment that Mark brings up: do you think Heupel's been holding back showing the true defense for this game? I don't think that's the case at all. I don't think that's something you can do when you play any SEC team. You've already played Florida, Alabama, and LSU. I think they looked a lot better against Kentucky because it's later in the season. They've gotten better. Jalen McCullough was back. Like you mentioned, some other guys got some run because he was out and some other guys were out. Also, Kentucky's scheme was just really, really, really bad. It was just a terrible offensive scheme that Tennessee had the answer for. Georgia does some similar things and as far as trying to possess the ball, so maybe that bodes well for Tennessee in this game, but Georgia's still much more talented, so it'll be a little bit of a different game you saw against Kentucky. But my third point is I think Kirby Smart's going to come out and try to stop the throw game immediately. I think he wants to stop Tennessee from getting one of those long touchdown passes to Jalen Hyatt on their first drive, like we've seen so many times this year. I think he's going to sell out to stop that, present Tennessee with the run, and then kind of say, like, hey, our defensive line can stop your running back. Like, that's what Kirby's going to try to do. So I think you have to establish the run early. Because if you go out there on that first drive, if that's how Georgia attacks it, and you can go out there and run the ball like you did against Kentucky and pick up chunk yardage, you're going to force Georgia to kind of adjust and be like, okay, we got to do something here because they're just going down the field. Are we going to try to stop the run, open up the passing game a little bit? What are we going to do? If you can establish the run early in this game, I think it'll change the way the entire game is played.
Absolutely. Because that's That's what it feels like almost every defense outside of like the Pittsburgh game, which I think Tennessee was still kind of getting its legs underneath them during that Pittsburgh game. But since then, it's kind of been like every defense thinks they have a plan until Tennessee starts running the ball on you. Because and actually, credit to Kirby Smart, he really emphasized in a press conference. Was it earlier today, maybe yesterday? Mm-hmm. He talked about how Tennessee's offense is really predicated on the run, because that's where they just get you in a complete bind, is where they can run on the ground or with Hooker, and then that frees up the wide receivers to blast you over the top, and then they just put you at this numbers disadvantage and get you in this bind. And if they can run the ball here, that's going to be the key to opening everything up and being able to score enough points to where when Georgia's offense gets theirs, and they're gonna, you can hang, you can go toe to toe. And I think this was absolutely true for Alabama, and ended up winning you the game. Just be there in the fourth quarter. Like, just be with Alabama. You were tied, I believe, going into the fourth quarter. In this one, be a touchdown ahead, be tied, be a touchdown behind even. Just be there in that fourth quarter where you can give yourself a chance to win. And I think that's everything you would want and more out of this matchup. Just because, Georgia has a talent advantage, period. We all know that. So you have to do things that are going to somehow beat that. And Heupel's done it all season long with a number of teams now. And, we'll just have to see. But those are our three keys. There was something I wanted to point out back here. I did like two different people. Nathan and Mark both said Slaughter at cornerback was genius in terms of talking about defensive adjustments. Absolutely. That was a great move, and kind of what I said, like where Jalen McCullough going out was in some sense a blessing because it got you exposed to Danico Slaughter. He was more or less McCullough's backup, and now this sort of frees him up to do other things on that defense now that McCullough's back. And then there was a Georgia fan that said that he's a Georgia fan, but we have a good show. Thank you, Daniel. There was something else, and I'm just not finding it. I don't know. There's too many comments. There's 200 people watching right now. But that's it. So let's review mine. My 3 points were play mistake-free football, get to Stetson Bennett, hurries, sacks if you can, take advantage of Mims potentially being out, and then through doing number 2, just do enough on defense overall. You don't have to stop Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers can have 300 yards through the air as long as Tennessee's offense can come right back and win. Just do enough. That's all I ask. So those are my 3, and then yours were, Zach.
Yeah, I have you got to make Georgia's tight ends. Don't let Georgia's tight ends beat you. Make the wide receivers and Stetson Bennett beat you that way. Protect Hendon Hooker. That is Georgia's quickest way to win this game. If they can get consistent pressure on Hooker, they will win, and they'll probably win by multiple scores if that's the case. And that could go both ways. If Tennessee can affect Georgia's passing game, that's obviously could tilt the game in Tennessee's favor significantly as well. And then you got to establish the run early. You got to make Georgia respect the run. You have to beat Georgia's defensive line. You cannot let them stop the run. You got to make them get their linebackers involved. Get extra linebackers on the field, whatever it is, you got to be able to do that. And through that, obviously the goal is Georgia's got their secondary on the field. You're running so fast that you're not letting them substitute linebackers in, and you're running the ball so well that they badly want to substitute. Maybe they even have to burn a timeout. I don't know. Either way, if you can run the ball, you're going to put Georgia in a lot of conflict by doing that. And somebody in the comments, I can't find it, they asked if Georgia is going to sell out to stop one, what would you prefer it be, the run or the pass? And it's a really good question because
pass.
Tennessee's making it splash plays down the field in the passing game.
Because Jalen Hyatt can just beat you straight up physically. And I don't think that Georgia has a dude to stop Hyatt. I don't think they do.
I don't think so either. So I feel like if they're stopping the run, it probably means that they're having to load the box. So I think you're going to be and if they're loading the box, you can beat them in one-on-one matchups, and you're going to get Hyatt where you want him. They've made Alabama look silly. They've made Kentucky. I'm not saying Georgia will look just as bad, but we saw it last year at times when Georgia would get confused. I mean, they're running these plays so fast that the defense doesn't really have time to get set and communicate with each other on who needs to do what. And that's why you're seeing Hyatt get matched up on safeties or safeties, like they're worried about the underneath stuff, which kind of blows my mind that teams are even focusing on the underneath stuff. Just like let them have it because you don't want to get beat down the field. But you're seeing them get so concerned with it that safeties aren't dropping into coverage or dropping down the field to stop the stuff over the top at all.
And when Tennessee gets into that, specifically when it's Cedric Tillman and Jalen Hyatt in that stack on the sideline and Hyatt's behind Tillman, they did this twice against Kentucky and Jalen Hyatt scored a touchdown on both.
When they one time they just switched spots right in front of the defenders, which was, I mean, it seems so simple. Yeah. But it worked.
It throws these guys through a loop, and it ended up in one of them, a linebacker was on Jalen Hyatt, and that's a joke. I mean, that's not going to work. and it just, even if you have the dude to stop a Jalen Hyatt physically in that scenario, they're using a scheme that's going to confuse you. And you may be able to defend it. You may be able to, but they are, in that scenario, Tillman and Hyatt are at a market advantage, and don't think they're not. And I wanted to address this. We got a few Georgia fans actually listening right now. I mean, we don't discriminate. Appreciate it. This guy, SWGA, says, it seems like Tennessee fans act like this is Kirby's first time playing the Heupel offense. We played the same team last year. No, you did not. You didn't. You did not play this team last year. And you must have not been here earlier in the show because I explained this. I said this all last week before Kentucky. Kentucky fans thought they were playing the 2021 Tennessee team coming in, and they thought they were going to be able to put up 45 points, and Tennessee maybe will score 48. That's what they thought was going to happen. You are wrong. That's not correct. And don't assume that. Yeah, and he's responding here. He says it's the same players. It is. Guess what? They're way, way better now. And the scheme is way better, and they're far more experienced, and they can, specifically the things that I was saying earlier, they can move the ball in short yardage, and they can run right at you, and they have an offensive line that moves earth, and they have these dudes that win in the trenches, they win on the wings, they win in the backfield, and they will beat you. Like this, I know this comes off, it's a Tennessee show, we're orange-colored glasses. This is not the same team. And if you go and talk to somebody that knows football better, they'll tell you that's wrong. I mean, that just is just not correct. It's not.
I think the best way to put it, without giving away what our game picks here that we're going to make in a few minutes, that Tennessee team last year I did not think was capable of beating Georgia. And I mean, I think that was apparent if you watched the game. They had some success. They moved the ball better than most teams have against Georgia, but they still were nowhere close to beating Georgia. I don't know what will happen Saturday. I mean, anybody that says they do is foolish because you just don't know how the game will play out. But I do believe this team is capable of beating Georgia. They beat Alabama. They went toe-to-toe with them. They got in a shootout. They outlasted them. They've beaten LSU on the road. They've won these big games that last year they're not winning. They weren't in the Alabama game last year. They lost to Florida by multiple scores. They probably would have lost to LSU even with Ed Ogeron being a lame duck there. They just weren't in the same position. So you're right. It's the same players. It's the same coaches, but they know what they're doing. They're comfortable in it. They've worked this system out. They've added stuff to it. I think what you saw last year is Heupel. Part of the reason it worked is he didn't try to make it too complicated. He didn't try to put too much on them in year one. They ran a lot of basic stuff in his offense that they're still running this year, but they've added so much to it and they're executing it, and players are where they need to be. And there aren't these miscommunications. There aren't players that are unsure of what to be doing in every situation. Like, these guys are focused. I mentioned it earlier, that play where Hendon Hooker snuck it on fourth down was a perfect example of everybody knew exactly what to do in that situation. They're all on the same page. There's no looking to the sideline. They know we're at the 50. It's fourth and short. We're lining up. We're going for it. There is no question. There is no hesitation. And that's why it works better this year, is because they have that trust in each other. And it's so smooth. I mean, it's so smooth to be able to do that without time running off the clock, or much time running off the clock. It's amazing. And that's been coaching, and it's been players buying in. They're more comfortable in the system. I'm not saying Tennessee will or won't win on Saturday, but it is a much different team than what Georgia faced last year.
Yeah. I just don't assume that. And that's not, we're about to make our predictions. That's not to say that I think Tennessee's going to win by 2 touchdowns or something, but it is a fool's errand to just go, oh, this is the same team as last. That's exactly what Kentucky did. You know what Tennessee did? Beat their head in. Yeah. That's what they did. It's a family show. call myself. They beat the friggin' brakes off them. That's what they did. So don't. And I know Kirby is not. I gave Kirby credit in that he acknowledged what Tennessee's offense is in his press conference. He knows. He knows.
I
what
think
the deal
Kirby.
Is.
I mean, I've been critical of Kirby in the past by saying, "Oh, they just have the best players." But he's a good coach because we've seen talent squandered. We've seen elite talent squandered. We've seen it happen in Knoxville with Butch Jones, with a team that properly coached could have been in the playoff that season, but they didn't have a good coach. Kirby's a smart guy. He's a very good defensive mind. At this point in time, I would say that what he's doing, is better, not better than Nick Saban in his prime, but he's better than current Nick Saban. I would give him that at this point with what he's getting out of his players and the way he's running his program. I would say that it's a much tougher. This the toughest challenge that Tennessee will face this season, without a doubt.
Well, let's get to what we think will happen in this game, Zach. You got somewhere to be, so we got to go ahead and wrap it up here. Tramel says, "Watch the F-bombs." It was half the word.
We've been doing this for over 2 years, 2.5, almost 3 years.
It's the first time I've ever done that.
Yeah, and we've only been doing it live for a couple of months, and even non-live, Charlie never went there. But that's what happens when Tennessee is 8-0 heading into November with the number 1, number 2 showdown.
It's just how passionate I get when specifically talking about Kentucky. Dude, Kentucky fans, they get me going. And somebody, this is actually perfect right here. Aaron Duck says, "When are you guys going to go on the Talk and Vols show with Boogie Bentley?" Funny you should mention that. Stand by and watch the channel, this channel, for developments as far as that goes. I won't. Nothing's happened yet, so I don't have anything put in stone. But just like I said, watch out. All right, let's predict this game. We don't know at this point. This is Monday. We don't know what the college football playoff rankings are. Tennessee may be number 1 on Tuesday. Georgia may be number 1 on Tuesday. But either way, it's number 1 versus number 2 in Sanford Stadium. Georgia at this point an 8 to a 9-point favorite, depending on the book that you look at. Zach, how are you feeling about this one? What's the score?
So I've been going back and forth all day, really, even into yesterday, thinking about this game, thinking about score prediction, how it could possibly play out. Like I said, I think Tennessee is capable of beating Georgia. I don't think Georgia is as good as they were last year. I think back to that Alabama-Tennessee game, though, where Tennessee wins 52-49. They get that last-second field goal. It's at home. They won the game, yes, but that game could have easily went in Alabama's favor. And I think Georgia's better than Alabama. So it's on the road. I just don't think I can pick Tennessee to win this game as much as I want them to win, as much as they can win. It's that old thing. Like, you have to go with like who's been good, like who's been dominating this series. And I think it's Georgia's. I think Georgia wins 45-41.
45-41. So very close, very high scoring. Georgia pulls it out. It sounds like you think it's going to go pretty similar to the Alabama game, but just work out in the other team's favor. I'll say to everybody, drop in your prediction on the comments. Got a ton of people watching right now. Drop in your prediction. I'll read them off after I give mine here. Appreciate everybody watching. I can tell you this. If this game was in Neyland Stadium, I would be predicting a Tennessee win without a doubt. The way that this team is playing and the camaraderie and the excitement and just the way that they prepare every week has just been so impressive. They not only have they been prepared for every game adequately, they've been exceptional every single week. Just smashing LSU, smashing Kentucky, bringing it straight to Alabama in a way that very few teams ever have since Nick Saban's been the coach. I mean, it's just been above and beyond. This game is in Sanford Stadium. And as much as we kind of said earlier, like the conventional wisdom there is that it's not like the greatest atmosphere in all of college football. It's still going to be very loud, and it's arguably, I mean, this came from a Georgia fan. You said arguably the biggest game that's ever occurred in that stadium. Number 1 versus number 2. There's only been 3 number 1 versus number 2 games in the entire modern era of the SEC. That is so tough. And I do think this will be a shootout. I think Georgia's going to get theirs through Brock Bowers, through the running game, through their offensive line. Tennessee is going to give them a hard time, and they're going to get stops and probably get turnovers too. So, Tennessee's defense has been improving every single week. It's been really impressive. And Tennessee's offense is going to get theirs also. I think that guy in the comments is in for a bit of a rude awakening come Saturday. But it just can't. Georgia's just the most talented team in America. They just are. And I think they're able to just make 1 or 2 more plays. And as I said, this is in Neyland. This is a Tennessee win for me. That's how positive I've become about this. And I wouldn't think 2 seconds about it. That's a Tennessee win. Just with the way that this team has played in Neyland Stadium. Oh my gosh. It's been unreal. But just on the road, the first full-blown road test for this team. Because at LSU, it was a noon game, and the LSU fans were out of that game by the end of the first quarter. I mean, you blasted them. And I just think it ends up being too much. So I will say something very similar. I'll say 41-38. Georgia's defense is able to keep Tennessee under 40. I know. I'm not going to sit here and lie to the good folks. This is what I think will happen. And the best part is Tennessee still has the playoff on the horizon, even with losing this game. So, and I like Gene says, okay, Kirk Herbstreit. Listen, buddy, don't you dare compare me to Kirk Herbstreit. Look, this team is phenomenal. Georgia is also excellent. I got to give you my actual analysis here. Now, let's go through what some of y'all think, since you think that we are negative Nellies and that we're bringing down the Tennessee fan base with our negativity. Let's see. John Hill says Tennessee 45-42. So he basically thinks it's going to go like we think, but Tennessee is the team that comes out on top. I could absolutely see that happening. Will I be surprised if this is the outcome? Not even a little bit.
No,
not
I won't
at
be
all.
surprised at all if Tennessee wins. But
it's just that close.
My gut feeling, you go off history, what Georgia has done, where they've been. This is a new position for Tennessee. They've handled success really well, but this is still the first time they've been in a game of this magnitude on the road. I know they've played at Pittsburgh and at LSU, but this is a much different game on the road. I mean, they took the crowd out of the LSU game real quickly, and I don't think that's going to happen with Georgia. I mean, I'm with you. I think Tennessee can win, John. I think they could win 45-42, and if they do win, that'll probably be close to the final score. My gut says that Georgia somehow pulls it out. They're just so deep, and Tennessee's got deeper as well. But I think those tight ends are really going to be a problem, and I think Georgia's going to be able to move the ball down the field. And I think their defense is slightly better than what you saw against Alabama. And I think that could be the difference. Like, I think they'll be able to get pressure on Hooker better than other teams have been able to so far. Yeah. Even though they're ranked near the bottom in sacks, I get all that. And that's the way teams have schemed up against them to get the ball out quicker. Same thing with Tennessee early in the year when they weren't getting sacks. I just think Georgia's a really good team. And I'm with you. If it was in Neyland, I would pick Tennessee. But I think Athens being at Sanford Stadium, that's the coin flip for me.
Yeah. Gene says,
and I do hope, like Jay mentions here, your gut is wrong. I hope so too. I hope that's the case. Trust me. I don't want to be right about this in any way. Please, if Tennessee wins, come. Hit me on Twitter or whatever.
I think if Georgia plays the way that they played against Florida, I think Tennessee could win by a touchdown. Plus, if Stetson Bennett throws 2 interceptions, if you make that many mistakes against this offense, you're in for a day. But it's in Sanford Stadium. That, like I said, that's the difference. They won't have the specter of like pre-snap penalties and things like that where you would in Neyland. I mean, that got so deep under Alabama's skin in that game. 17 penalties. I mean, it was just brutal. It's a huge difference maker. It really is. But back, Gene says 45-38. Pierre, this is an interesting take. He says 23-17 Tennessee. More of these looking. 48-42 for Nathan. Trammell says 38-24 Tennessee. Jay says Tennessee 42, Georgia 35. Friggin' Big Ten Jeff. He says 34-28 for Georgia for his. Cuban Missile says 48-35 Tennessee. Thank you to everybody for weighing in. Obviously, we all know we want Tennessee to win this game. Please, if Tennessee pulls this off, like everybody, and Mark says 55-28 Vols. He's very optimistic, as he always is. If Tennessee did this, where does this rank in like the pantheon of all-time wins? It's got to be what? I mean,
well, I think
it's Florida. It's Florida in '98 because it's the hurdle you have to get over to make it to a national championship. Right?
Yeah,
or almost Arkansas '98.
Right.
Like,
so I think it's in line with that Florida game in '98 and the Florida game in 01, but that Florida game in 01 doesn't look as big in retrospect because of what happened. They lost to LSU in the SEC championship game, and they didn't get to play for a natty. So I think you got to let the season play out before we really know how big it is. But in the moment, yeah, it's huge. I mean, I think if Tennessee wins this game, it's like when LSU beat Alabama in 2019. That was the game where it was like, oh, this LSU team isn't just good. This LSU team is the team to beat to win the. Yeah, this is the team. So if Tennessee beats Georgia Saturday, no matter how it is, they become the team. They become the undisputed best team in college football. It becomes their national championship to lose. They're in that kind of conversation at that point if they beat Georgia. And look, like I said, they can. Like I'm predicting them to lose by 4. Like I'm saying that the last score goes in Georgia's favor and not Tennessee's. This is a coin flip. And like I said, Athens, it being on the road, that's the tiebreaker for me.
Brent says 45-17 Vols. Cody says 63-42. Ooh, that would be a game. I hope we lay 63 on him. That'd be pretty awesome.
And I'll say part of my prediction too is I don't think we really know how good Georgia is or isn't because we have not seen them play a top 5 team like Tennessee has played Alabama. So I'm kind of giving them a lot of credit based on what they did last year. Even though they lost a lot of guys, they had a lot of talent to replace them, and you're getting later in the season where those guys should be improving just like Tennessee has improved. So I'm giving them a lot of credit just kind of based on past history too.
I think this will be the last one. Ricky says 55-34 Georgia. There's our prediction there, and I think that's it for today's show. Anything else, Zach, before we bounce out of here that you wanted to cover about Tennessee, Georgia, mock Kentucky?
I wish Kirby Smart would talk a little trash this week. I know it's not really his style, and I don't think he's going to this week, but I really wish he would. That would just make this much more fun and would give Tennessee some locker room bulletin board material, which Kentucky gave them. Come on, Kirby. Throw something out there, or at least let one of your players do it.
This team, Tennessee, has responded incredibly to bulletin board material. I wish they would. Dang it. I did like somebody earlier in the comments. I don't remember who it was, but they said Kirby Smart has the worst haircut in the SEC. Without a fact. I mean, without a doubt. For sure, that's a fact. Thank you to everybody for weighing in. We apologize for our negativity. Lord willing, we are wrong. We are very, very wrong. That would be amazing.
I don't think we're negative about this team at all. I think we love what we're seeing.
I love this team.
If anything, we're trying to bring them good vibes. It worked when Charlie picked Florida in the Tennessee game. And I think it was a Georgia fan that said it in the comments. Like, Tennessee's been getting all the hype this week. And that's going, Kirby's pumping that into the Georgia locker room. So we're just trying to do our part to even it out. We want Tennessee to be the underdog in this one.
If I do anything on this show, it's predict things wrong. So we all know that. And I said with Bryce Young playing, they'd lose to Alabama. I said that Florida was still in our head, and look where we are. Go and do it one more time, Tennessee, please. I'm begging you, please, please, please. And to finish off, look out for videos on this here channel, A to Z Sports, through the rest of the week, especially the folks who are fans of Talking Vols. Hint, 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 hint. That is it. I'm Charlie Burris. That is Zach Reagan of A to Z Sports at Charlie_Burris at Zach TNT, A to Z Sports.com. Yada, yada, yada. You guys are here. You've been watching all this time. You know where to find us, where we are. Yeah, that's it, right?
Yep.
Cool. Let's go win. Go Vols. Beat Georgia. And we'll talk to y'all, well, in a few days, but also next week.
See you guys later.